Welcome to the Holding Hope podcast. My name is Pam Orr, and I am the Executive Director for Fellowship Housing, a nonprofit that empowers single moms. The Holding Hope podcast is a space for courageous single moms to share their journeys. Through their stories, we will explore the life-changing power of hope. Each of these women inspires me, and I know they will inspire you as well. I'm so glad you've decided to listen. Welcome to the Holding Hope podcast. I'm your host, Pam Orr, and the Executive Director of Fellowship Housing. I believe that single moms are some of the hardest working people on the earth and are the unsung heroes of our day. I'm so excited for you to meet our guest, Dawn, today. I met Dawn 5-ish years ago when she walked through the doors of Fellowship Housing. Those closest to Dawn describe her as resilient, unstoppable, and strong. She is the mom to Danny, who is a sophomore in high school. She is fun, and she is incredibly awesome. I'm excited for you to hear her story of overcoming amidst difficult circumstances. Welcome, Dawn.
Hi.
I'm so glad to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. I thought we'd start off with something a little unique and interesting about you, just to kind of warm us up and let the listeners know a little bit about you. I'm going to say 2 words, and then I'm going to let you take it from there. And those words are unicorns and pink flamingos.
2 of my favorite things in the whole entire wide world. So I have, it's like a borderline unhealthy obsession with unicorns at this point, because I just like how they're magical. You know, they're just majestic and I love them. I have a collection of stuffed unicorns. I know it's embarrassing. I'm 42 years old. I should not have a collection of stuffed unicorns, but I do. And then pink flamingos. My grandmother actually was a huge fan of pink flamingos. She used to go to Vegas and stay at the Flamingo all the time. And growing up, flamingos were always just kind of just like a comforting thing for me. So, it kind of grew into being one of my, favorite animals. So every time I see flamingos at a zoo, I get super excited. Everybody laughs at me, but, everybody's got their thing, minus flamingos and unicorns.
I like it. It's the magic and it's the memories, right?
Yep, absolutely.
I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that. Well, if you don't mind, we're going to take a step back because I really want our listeners to hear your story because it's an incredible story. One of the things that I think is common with moms who are parenting on their own is that they find themselves often before they step out on their own, living in situations that are extremely difficult and hard. And they often get people that say, "Why did you stay so long? Why didn't you leave?" You've kind of had a situation similar to that, maybe not what everybody's expecting, but you found yourself in that type of a situation at one point in your life. Mm-hmm. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about that time?
Sure. So I was living with my mom, and she was disabled. Actually, both of my parents were disabled for a number of years. My mom and dad both physically, and my dad was also mentally, a little bit unstable. He had bipolar disorder with dementia. So I ended up being the primary caregiver for the both of them at one point in my life, and this is pre-becoming a single mom. I unexpectedly found myself pregnant. It was not planned, obviously, not expecting to ever be a single parent. I was pretty steadfast in the decision that I did not want to have kids ever in my life. But when I came up pregnant, I was like, this might be the one opportunity for me to experience what that unconditional love feels like. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I was prepared to do it 100% on my own. His father was not in the picture. I never anticipated him ever being in the picture. So I was pregnant and going to be a single mom and still taking care of both of my parents as primary caregivers. My dad passed away in December of 2010 when my son was about 2.5 years old. He was almost 3. So then I was the primary caregiver for my mom, who throughout the years just got increasingly, sicker. She had a lot of really complex medical issues, and it just became so overwhelming for me to handle. And now I have, a child that's approaching preteen years and taking care of my mom. So it got to a point where her safety was an issue and she had to go into a nursing home. And I was losing a third of the income that we had with no savings, a ridiculous amount of debt. I did not know how to budget effectively because I never thought there was a day that, my mom wouldn't be there. So she ended up, going into a nursing home. And I found myself, sort of in an emergency situation where, I didn't make enough money, and the options were, finding some sort of support or assistance, or I would have to move into a neighborhood, and that was not safe, for me and my son to move into. And I was kind of running a little bit out of options. And a friend of mine told me about a fellowship housing. And I filled out the application and got a call back within 24 hours. I was amazed by it. But yeah, my circumstance is a little bit different, but still, still very, very tough. It's very hard to be a primary caregiver for your parents. Because they're supposed to be the one taking care of you, up to a certain point. So
what did that do? Not only was it a difficult time physically, if I remember correctly, your mom was not only challenging in terms of her physical abilities, but also challenging in the way that she spoke to you and treated you.
Yes. My mom has never been a very affectionate parent. And oftentimes she was hypercritical of me and the way that I decided to do things. It was very, and then when Danny came along, I had already had a sense of not feeling worthy or good enough. And every decision that I made when it came to him was always challenged by her. That feeling of not being worthy just continued. And it was a struggle because she wanted to be, the person that made the decisions, and she wanted me to take a backseat to parenting my child. And it led to a lot of conflict. And she, at times could be very verbally abusive. And, I felt that not fighting back and not arguing was the best thing to do, and just be quiet and not challenge her and just sort of let things go. But that also led to me being, creating a lot of anxiety and a lot of just feelings of inadequacy. I didn't feel like I was allowed to be an adult. I didn't feel like I was allowed to be a parent. So
you said when talking or wrote when talking about this time in your life that it got very dark, and were it not for Danny in your life,
yes,
you're not sure you'd be here today.
Absolutely. 100%. Things got so bad with me and my mom that I literally stood in the basement and wondered if there was a way out. And the only thing that stopped me was the fact that I would leave my son without a parent. And I did not want him to be raised, without me. So, but yes, things in life got really, really dark, without getting into too many details. but I do battle depression. I never really recognized it because, I lived in what now I consider survival mode, all the time, every day, 24/7. Like I couldn't even sleep a full night, without being woken up for one reason or another. And it just seemed like a life that I didn't want to live anymore.
I think when you're in that survival mode too, what I think sometimes we forget, those of us that are asking the questions like, why did you stay so long? Or why didn't you get help sooner? Or whatever the questions are, is we forget when you're in survival mode, there is no brain space to make those kind of decisions, to invite others in, to even think about there being another way of life. Would that be a correct characterization?
I think absolutely 100%. It's funny that you bring that up because me and my brother, we're actually talking about this exact subject on Sunday because I was telling him that I was going to be on this podcast and I had to talk about some things that might make people uncomfortable. And I talked with him and he asked me, like all along, he's like, why didn't you just move out? Like, why didn't you just leave? And I told him that I didn't feel that that was an option. I didn't feel like I had the financial security or, even the option to leave, to stop, putting up with this situation that I'm in. It just didn't seem like there was a way out, There was never enough money for me to save, for me to move out. And then, if I even brought up the subject, I was guilt tripped, and told, oh, just fine, leave, you'll just leave me alone. And, and then, that pulled at my heartstrings because this is family. I love my mom, she's the person that gave birth to me. I love her, but there were times in my life where it was hard to love her,
Yeah.
And so I feel like I stayed out of a sense of obligation because, my brother was lucky enough to meet a wonderful woman. My sister-in-law is amazing. And, he got married and he got a job opportunity out of state, which is awesome. He is successful and he's an amazing person. He's got a great personality, great family, but I stayed behind, to take care of our parents and got stuck.
Yeah. So then it became clear that your mom needed more help. Mm-hmm. And so a door of some sorts opened up, even if maybe you weren't quite ready for that door to open up. Mm-hmm. I think you said you felt a bit panicked.
Yes.
Because where in the world were you going to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Up until that point in my life, like I was used to living, a certain way. And even though now I realize that living that way was not healthy, it wasn't good for me and it wasn't good for Danny. It wasn't good for anybody involved. But this doorway opened and yes, I was panicked because it's something new and it's unknown. And it's that fear of walking into something. And what if I can't do this? What if I am not successful? What if I don't succeed? All of these negative thoughts in my head, that, caused me to say, okay, well, maybe this isn't the best choice for me, but what other choices do I have? So I was very panic stricken. But the first meeting that I had with Fellowship Housing, when I left that meeting, I felt a spark of hope, but I also felt, okay, because I had 2 dogs. I was like, I couldn't bring my dogs. I had to try to rehome them. And then I was like, I can't get rid of my dogs. And then I'm like, okay, well, but you need a place to live. What good are they going to do if you don't have a place to home them?
Yeah.
So it took some thinking. And then I talked to my best friend. She was actually the person that found fellowship housing. And she said, don't be an idiot.
She's a very good friend.
She
likes it like it is.
She's like, what exactly are you afraid of? And I said, well, I'm afraid that I'm not going to do okay, that I'm not going to be good at this. And she's like, and you're so great at what's happening right now. And I'm just like, well, you're not wrong. Because at that point, I felt like I was failing at life. Not only was my mom going into nursing home, like my mom was literally one step on death's doorstep at that point, and then I find out I don't have enough money to pay the rent for the current place I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
My money was running out. My lease was coming up. And then like, what was going to happen after that? Like everything was just unknown. So, I had to sit back and think, all right, it took like 3 days. Okay. And like 3 days for me to be like, yeah, I'm going to do this. If they accept me, I'm going to do this because I need something, I can't just keep going the way that I'm going right now.
Something needs to
give and something needed to change.
I love that you said there was a spark of hope.
Mm-hmm.
How difficult is it to live without hope?
The only thing that's stronger than fear is hope.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing else in life that's stronger than that. So basically living on the edge of fear constantly, that becomes a normal feeling for you or for me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize how much fear I was holding until I didn't have to hold it anymore.
Yeah. Let's talk about that because you said when you wrote some answers to some questions that I sent you, that you moved into fellowship housing. So when you join the fellowship housing family, you're given an apartment. We move you in on that first day, or we take you there, give you the keys, and you move in on your first day. And I think you said, I moved in with $1 to my name, but I knew I had a home.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the significance of that sentence when it comes to fear and hope.
So it is true. When I moved into the fellowship housing home after I'd paid movers to move me, all the things that I needed to do, I had $1 in my bank account. But based on all of the conversations that I had with the fellowship housing family, I knew that they were not going to let me fail. My family advocate, even that first day that I met her, I knew that she was going to be in my corner and she was going to make sure that I didn't fail. So even though I had $1 to my name, I felt leaps and bounds better than when I've had $1,000 in my bank account, because for whatever reason, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in a really long time. I felt like I could just breathe. As a matter of fact, I got it tattooed on my arm. A month before I moved into the fellowship housing apartment, I went and I got the words "just breathe" tattooed on my arm.
I never knew that.
As a reminder.
I love that.
To make sure that in times in your life when you're struggling, I tend to hold my breath. And my brother told me, sometimes you just got to breathe.
Simple.
Yeah.
Take it back to something simple.
Yep.
So when I started and when I introduced you, I said there were 3 words that people that know you describe you as: resilient, unstoppable, and strong. The season of your life that you just described, and when you just began your journey with fellowship housing, would you have used those 3 words to describe yourself?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't know what words I would necessarily use to describe myself when I first moved into fellowship housing. I probably would have used terms like low self-esteem, scared, and And fearful, just because I didn't know what road my life was going to lead.
Yeah.
And it's throughout my experience with fellowship housing that I developed that resiliency. And I've started to feel unstoppable, and I started to feel strong. And as a matter of fact, when you asked me what 3 words people used to describe me, I asked other people.
Wonderful.
What words would they use to describe me, especially people that are close to me, that know my story and know my journey and all of that. And those are the words that they used. And I asked them, why would you use that word? And they said resilient because, you're adaptable and you can adapt to change quickly. Unstoppable because no matter what you faced in your life, you have always kept moving forward and you never stopped. Mm-hmm. And strong because I came out of fellowship housing and my situation with a completely different mindset about myself and the fact that I'm not fearful and I can be strong and I can stand up for myself. And it's not a physical strength, it's more of a mental strength. So those were the 3 words that other people used to describe me.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. For you to have others reflect that back to you, and I can see it in your body language right now, like you own those words. Those are who you are today. I love that. One thing I don't want to miss with that season before fellowship, when that season of just hard and dark for you, where was Danny in all of this? What was Danny experiencing, and how would you describe Danny at that time?
Danny was emotional. He didn't understand. Unfortunately, Danny got to see me at some of my darkest moments in my life. I knew I wasn't going to get emotional, but he saw me at some of the darkest moments in my life. He saw me, downstairs in the basement, sitting in the dark and just crying because I just didn't know what to do. So he acted out in ways, not anything really bad, but he was emotional because he didn't understand why there was this conflict. Me and my mother did argue. We argued a lot. She's Dutch, I'm Dutch and German. This is what we do. We're both very stubborn people. But when we would argue, words would be said that can't be taken back. And he would not understand why we were so angry. And I, unfortunately, do have a very bad temper. And at times, I was not as patient as a parent as I should have been. And he developed, what I consider anxiety, because he felt like no matter what he would do or say, he would get yelled at, or he'd get in trouble or he'd get punished somehow. Now it was never a physical punishment, but, he would get yelled at, or sent to the corner or, something like that. So, he kind of started learning to just not say anything. And if people asked him questions, he had a really hard time answering because he didn't want to answer and say the wrong thing. So it did negatively affect him too, not just me, but I was trying to survive, and I don't want to say I didn't recognize it in him, but I didn't know when I'm trying to survive, I didn't know how to help him survive too.
It goes back to that capacity that you have, right? Mm-hmm. The capacity to see him and understand, and the capacity to do anything beyond surviving, right? Just making it to the next day.
Yep. Just making it to the next day, waking up the next morning, knowing that the day is going to be exactly the same as it was yesterday. It just was not, it wasn't living. It was just barely existing. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, he and I would steal moments where he and I could just be Mom and Danny, so we would go to the grocery store, and every time we would go to Target, we would stop at, the Starbucks and the Target, and he would get a cake pop if he was really good, but those are stolen moments. Those are moments where, I'm not at home, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, running errands, taking care of my mom, all of these things, in a 24-hour day, I think probably 16 to 18 hours of my day was either at work or taking care of my mom. By the time I was done for the day, Danny's asleep.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of time for him and I to just hang out and, do things together.
Stolen moments. That's a very profound statement as I think about all that a mom who's parenting on her own has on her plate for the day. And you said it, working full time, homework, bathing, getting, making dinner, doing the grocery shopping, paying the bills, in your case, caring for your parents. Goodness, to be able, and the fact that the moments with your children, with your child, had to be a stolen moment.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah. I mean, thinking about it now, because, Danny is my priority. 100%, next to me working a full-time job, because we all need to work. We all need to make money. When I get home, that is my time with him. Like, I joke around with people and say, like, I pay enough in rent that I actually want to enjoy the place that I live. Right.
Sure.
So I don't go out much.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of things, because that time belongs to me and Danny, because I feel like we didn't have enough of that when he was younger, and I missed a lot.
Yeah.
So
and
now
he's already a sophomore.
And already he's a sophomore in high school, and I refuse to give up any more of my time to something that's not absolutely necessary. And if he says, Mom, let's play a video game, as much as I hate playing video games, I have learned how to play some video games, just because that's our bonding time. That's the way that we communicate with each other. He talks more while we're playing video games than any other time.
Interesting. Isn't that interesting?
Because his guard's down.
Yeah.
Not that he feels that he needs to have his guard up around me, because I have a very open relationship with him. He knows he can talk to me about anything. But that's the time where I get to get him unfiltered, where he's not like, oh, is she going to get mad at me for saying this? And, he just says it.
Yeah. You're in his world. You've
Yep.
entered his space and his world.
I have entered his bubble space.
Yes, exactly. I'd love to talk briefly about, you talked about when you started the fellowship housing, you described yourself very differently than how you describe yourself today. Talk to me, talk to our listeners about what those 2 years, I think in your case, it was just under 2 years, 21 months, I think.
Yeah.
What took place in those 21 months that so shifted things for you and really you came out a new person?
I did. I think a lot of it had to do with before fellowship housing, I felt isolated in some cases. Like I have an amazing group of friends. I have an amazing brother and sister-in-law. I have a niece and nephew. I have people that are supportive of me. But I felt like I didn't have a support system that understood me. Because nobody in my friend group, or in my family group was a single mom. Like nobody understood very specifically the trials and tribulations that come with being a single mom. It wasn't, I felt that in that respect, I lacked a good support system. Other people that I can talk to about my situation, have them understand it on a level that my friends and family couldn't necessarily understand. And I also didn't feel comfortable really talking in a lot of detail about my situation and being a single parent and all that, because to me, it felt like I was complaining, which I really wasn't. I just needed to get some things off my chest. So when I went into fellowship housing, all of a sudden I found that there was an entire group of women that knew exactly what I was going through. I was lucky enough to be placed in an apartment building that had not just one other, fellowship housing mom. When I moved in, there were two, and then ultimately three other fellowship housing moms, and we all lived. I lived on the third floor. Two of the moms lived on the second floor, and another mom lived on the third floor. And we were all sharing this journey together. Like, we were all doing this together.
Mm-hmm.
We all came from slightly different circumstances, but at the same time, we all understood that struggle of being a single mom, of doing it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And we became great friends. Mm-hmm. And I, for once, felt like I wasn't completely alone in my journey. And we all helped lift each other up. If somebody was having a bad day, we were like, all right, we're all meeting here, and we would just sit and we'd, one of the moms was an artist. So I would just sit and talk to her while she painted. One of the other moms was, she was a single mom of two kids and she loved to do crafting, so she would sometimes corral me into crafting, which I'm not very good at. But I would just go down there. She also was an amazing cook too. So she would be like, oh, we have food. Why don't you come down? So we would all get together and we started spending holidays together. We celebrated birthdays by making cakes, all of that stuff. And slowly but surely, like, we helped build each other up from where we started to where we ended. And we all kind of started with the same sort of fear of the unknown, because we all kind of started around the same time.
Yeah. There's something so beautiful in what you're sharing. I think, fellowship housing provides structure and, there's budgeting and there's all of those rules and hard things that I'm sure when you got together, you commiserated.
Maybe.
But maybe.
maybe not.
But what I love about what you're sharing is there's such power in community.
Yes.
And in a community where you're seen and understood.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Because I felt like I was always in the background. Before fellowship housing, I felt like I was always in the background. Like, I felt so much shame because I was a single mom. I didn't do things the right way. So, and it wasn't necessarily something that was spoken, in my family. It was always just a sense of what I felt is that, although all my family loved Danny, they loved me, there was always this, kind of sense of shame in the back of my head that, she was dumb enough to get pregnant and, now she's a single mom, but we can't always, we don't always have control over everything that happens in our lives. I mean, I'm sure that there's a reason that I don't know that I was chosen to be Daniel's mom. And there probably is a reason why Daniel was given to me. And that reason was probably, because I had more in my life that I needed to accomplish. And I was on a path that I probably wouldn't be alive without him. So he's kind of my reason for living, a little bit.
That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
I like that. He's my reason for living. You said when you in your graduation speech. So when you graduated from fellowship housing, we always have all of our graduates stand up and give a speech, which I love because it gives you an opportunity to share your story. And you said this to me, I think it was before we went on air, that you're really proud of your story.
I am.
I love that.
I am. I'm proud of my story because it proves not just to me, but to other people that are in a similar situation. I always sort of felt at first, and it was never anything that, this was my own internal feeling. And a lot of this comes from where I came from emotionally before fellowship housing, that a lot of, at the very beginning, I felt almost undeserving of being accepted into fellowship housing because, there are women that are in fellowship housing that are coming from what I would consider much horrible circumstances than where I came from. But one of the moms that I became really good friends with told me, your story is no different. It's just not a husband or a boyfriend.
Yeah.
And I sat back and I thought about that and I said, very true. Very, very true.
Not the same story, but just as powerful of a story.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when you graduated, you said, for the first time in my life, I am optimistic about the future and I know I can do it. And in all caps, I got this.
I got this.
I got this. Tell me about life the last 3 years.
So the last 3 years, funny enough, on the day of graduation, when I lost my job that morning before graduation.
Did you tell us that?
I did not.
Oh, wow.
I did not, because I was still sort of reeling. So I don't feel like it was through any fault of my own. I feel like this was one of those things where it had to happen to set me on the path that I'm on now. When I was in fellowship housing, I worked for a company that I absolutely adored. I loved working for the company. But if I wanted to meet my goals and I wanted to get where I needed to be, I needed to increase my pay. And at the time, the current position that I was in, they didn't have anything else that they could offer me at that point.
No growth opportunities.
Right, exactly. There was no growth opportunities. So unfortunately, I had to leave this company that I absolutely loved and adored working for. And I went and worked for a company that, very quickly I figured out that wasn't exactly where I wanted to be, but I had to give it a shot. So I was there for about 1.5 years. And then they let me go for what I consider a crappy reason. Because I always put 110% into every job. But at the same time, I had reached out to my previous employer and we were in negotiations for me going back.
Interesting.
So I tell you that story to tell you that I went back to that company and I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. I am in such an amazing, place, in my life because of them and because of me. They welcome me back with open arms. I work for an amazing team. The company is amazing. I've been promoted.
Congratulations. You're in management now.
Yes, management of a process more than of a person, okay. But it's still management-esque. We're hoping that that'll expand at some point in the next year or so. But I love working for the company and the team that I work for. They love me, of course. It's not
What's not to love?
But they've given me a voice and I've used my voice and they make me feel, worthy. And the suggestions that I make, they put into action and they're like, here, write it up. We'll see what happens. But yeah, we're doing a great job. And then, moving out of fellowship housing, I wanted to move into this one specific apartment complex. I felt that if I got accepted there, like I'd really gotten what I wanted. So I did.
Wonderful.
I moved into the apartment complex that I wanted into a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,100 square foot apartment. I love it. And, we have no plans to move at any point soon. And, Danny's going to high school and he's doing an amazing job. He gets A's and B's, mostly A's. But he's so smart, and he's intelligent and intuitive, and he wants to be a chef. He wants to go to culinary arts school, Michelin star chef. I'm rolling my eyes for those of you that can't see me, which is very prestigious, but he loves cooking. He loves, everything about it. His fallback plan is video game designer, but that's going to be a hobby.
It's good to have a plan B.
Right, exactly. Just in case this whole chef thing doesn't work out. He has at least the video game design thing to fall back on. But life is good. I feel at peace. And I don't struggle anymore. I feel like I am a completely different person than the person that first walked in the doors at Fellowship Housing. I am more confident. I'm definitely stronger. I feel like I was pretty strong before, when I think back on all that stuff, I was pretty strong before, but now I feel it. Yeah. I feel strong.
Yeah. It's interesting. You said you felt like you were in the background a lot. And to me, it's almost like before you were a supporting actor in your own life. And now you've taken up your rightful position as the lead.
I'm the lead actress in my life now.
There you go.
Which is amazing.
I love that.
It's so awesome.
Things have changed a little bit since that picture.
Oh, yeah.
Huh?
Yes. So I've lost about 60 pounds just through diet and exercise. And I look at that picture, I'm like, oh, I'm glad I made some changes. In my head, I still feel like I look that way. But I know that I don't.
Yeah. It's changing that tape in your mind.
Exactly. Yeah. I just have to change the narrative in my own head. Yeah. And that'll take time.
For sure. I hope there are moms listening that may be in that space that you were in before that was hard and dark and lonely. What would you say to that woman if she's listening right now?
So what I would say, to a mom that's sort of in that dark space is, one bad day doesn't equal a bad life, and that you just need to keep moving forward. I read a book from an author, and it has my absolute favorite line in it ever. And I have this written on my desk at work and at my own home. And it says, "Today is my favorite day." And the premise of that whole entire thing is that the main character in the story suffered from severe depression, which I also do. And one day he was talking to somebody, in a conversation in the book, and he said, "Well, today's my favorite day." And then the other person said, "Well, you said yesterday that was your favorite day." He's like, "Well, that was yesterday. Now today is my favorite day." And sometimes you just need to wake up each morning and just tell yourself that today's your favorite day.
Dawn, thank you for being vulnerable, for taking the risk and sharing your story with us on Holding Hope. It is inspiring to me, and I know it will be inspiring to others. So thank you for being with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad that you invited me.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Holding Hope podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation and found any value, would you follow and subscribe on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify? Also, if you know someone who would benefit from this conversation, would you please pass this podcast along? There's power in word of mouth. And if you know somebody who could use this community that Dawn spoke of so strongly, please pass it along. And finally, if you'd like to learn more about Fellowship Housing, you can find us at fhcmoms.org or on a variety of different social media platforms.